Mr. Leon McKinney is here to share a story from his childhood. His mother would read a folk tale, the exciting tale of Peter Rabbit, and here's Leon's rendition. Take it away.
Most adroitly said, Mr. Professor. A Tale of Peter Rabbit by Beatrix Potter. Once upon a time, there were 4 little bunnies. Flopsy, Mopsy, Cottontail, and Peter. "Now, my dears," said old Mrs. Rabbit, "you may go down the lane, you may go into the field, but do not go into Mr. McGregor's garden. Your father did. He had an accident. He was put into a pie by Mrs. McGregor. Now, do not get into mischief, for I am going out for a bit." Old Mrs. Rabbit grabbed her umbrella and her basket and headed out to the wood on her way to the baker, where she purchased a loaf of bread and 5 currant buns. Now, Flopsy, Mopsy, and Cottontail were good little bunnies. They went down the lane and began to pick some blackberries. Peter was a naughty little bunny. He went directly down to Mr. McGregor's garden, and he squeezed under the gate. First, he ate a bunch of lettuces. Then, he had some French beans. And to top it off, with a whole bunch of radishes. Now, he began to feel a little sick. And so, he began to look for some parsley. And as he walked by the cucumber frame, around the corner, whom do you think he ran into? It was Mr. McGregor! And Mr. McGregor, who was planting some small lettuces, saw him, and he jumped up. He grabbed his rake and waved and chased after him in a big hurry and declared, "Stop, thief!" Oh my goodness, Peter was scared and frightened, and he ran as fast as he could. We thought that Peter might make it. And then he became ensnared into a net by the gooseberry vine. It caught his new blue coat in the gold buttons, and Peter began to cry. He knew he was going to end up in Mr. McGregor's pie. And a friendly flock of sparrows came to him and exerted themselves excitedly in order to encourage him to free himself from the net. And they could hear Mr. McGregor coming. And Mr. McGregor, as he arrived, took a sieve and went to plop it on top of Peter. And just as he arrived, Peter escaped and jumped and ran off. And he ran as fast as he could, and he was lippity, loppity, lippity, lippity, and he lost one shoe in the lettuces, and he lost another shoe in the potatoes. And then he could even run faster, and as fast as he could go, and there it was, the tool shed. He ran into the tool shed, And this would have been a good thing, except when he jumped into the little water can, it was full of cold water. He began to shiver with fear, and then he heard old Mr. McGregor come in. And Mr. McGregor said, "I know you're in here, you little varmint." And he began to look under the flower pots very carefully. And Peter was shivering in the can, and he went, "Ka-chow!" And the can flopped over, and Mr. McGregor saw him, and he came over, and he almost put his foot on him. And Peter jumped just in time up through the small window, knocking over 3 more flower pots, and jumping out and escaping from Mr. McGregor. Mr. McGregor couldn't get through the small frame of the window. Besides, he was tired of chasing after Peter, so he simply turned and went back to his work. And Peter, exhausted and scared and wet, and puzzled, for he was lost and did not know where to go to get out of the garden. And he came upon a door frame at a nice little rock porch, and he looked down, and there was this little mouse with a pea in his mouth and 1 pea in each paw. And Peter looked at him and said, "Do you know the way out?" And the little mouse looked up at him. And Peter wept. Well, it wasn't long until he began to think. And he began to walk and came upon a nice pool of water where Mr. McGregor would fill up his water can. And there was a beautiful little white cat looking at all the goldfish. And Peter was very cautious because he remembered what his cousin, little Benjamin Bunny, said about the cat. So he quietly slipped away, and he came to a wheelbarrow, and he quietly climbed the wheelbarrow and peeked over the top, and he saw Mr. McGregor. Scritch! Scratch! Scratch! Scritch! He was hoeing some potatoes. And his back was turned to Peter. And beyond Mr. McGregor, he could see the gate. And he jumped down. And he ran as fast as he could along the side. And he saw Mr. McGregor out of his corner of his eye, who also saw him. And it was a race to the gate. And Peter beat him, slid under the gate, and was into the woods and safe at last. Now, Mr. McGregor, disgusted about this whole turn of affairs, took Peter's little blue jacket and made a scarecrow out of it, and put his new little shoes that he washed in the potatoes and put them as part of the scarecrow. And Peter, lippity-loppity-loppity-lip, ran all the way home, and he threw himself down on the sand, the soft sand, and his mother was cooking. And Peter felt so safe to be at home once again. And his mother said, "Peter, what have you done with your new blue jacket and shoes? This is the 2nd pair you have lost in the fort tonight." Peter was sad. His mother could tell that Peter wasn't feeling very well either. So she made him a cup of chamomile tea, and she gave Peter a dose that evening. In the meantime, Flopsy, Mopsy, and Cottontail were eating milk and blackberries and some of this beautiful bread she had got at the baker's. And they lived happily ever after. Now there's a moral to this story that my mother used to read to me in my childhood, and that's why I selected it this evening. Here's the moral. Number 1, mind your mother. Number 2, if you become ill, a dose of chamomile tea is just a ticket. And number 3, if you do obey your mother, you won't find yourself in this kind of a pickle.